Let's go on to 17 because they are a bit interrelated. Okay. And discussion topic number 17: how do you understand dhammavicaya as an awakening factor? What do you mean by investigating the Dhamma? How? What Dhamma do you investigate? Okay. What Dhamma do you investigate? And how do you investigate the Dhamma in order for it to qualify as an awakening factor? Okay. So I hope these two questions are clear enough. So please form your groups and start your discussion.
From our discussion and also some of my opinion, when the awakening factor of dhammavicaya has reached its heightened level, a person would not lost the chance of investigating anything around him or her. The investigating, the dhammavicaya will continue investigating either in terms of cause and condition, cause and effect, and it also will take anicca, dukkha, and anatta as an investigating
Criteria.
criteria.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that includes conceptual truth as well, or does it only include paramattha dhamma, ultimate reality?
It can be both.
Can be both.
Yes, can be both.
That is when dhammavicaya has reached its peak. How
Yes.
about the low end dhammavicaya?
Low end.
How do you start? How do you start to get to the peak?
Low end is slower pace.
What does that mean?
Slower pace, meaning you start with like 6 sense base. You look at the eye object and the contact. Then you try to understand the conditionality. Slowly, when it matures, then it will gain its peak.
Okay, thank you. Sadhu. Okay, anyone else like to contribute? No? Okay, then let's turn to page 98. Yeah, answers to both these questions are partially there. Page 98, Virtue Discourse. Those monks who are accomplished in virtue, accomplished in composure, that means in samadhi, accomplished in knowledge, accomplished in liberation, accomplished in the knowledge and vision of liberation. Monks, even the sight of those monks is helpful, I say. Even listening to them, even approaching them, even attending on them, even recollecting them, monks, even going forth after them is helpful, I say. For what reason? Because monks, having heard the Dhamma from such monks, one dwells withdrawn by way of two kinds of withdrawal: withdrawal of body and withdrawal of mind. Dwelling thus withdrawn, one recollects that Dhamma and thinks it over. Whenever a monk dwelling thus withdrawn recollects the Dhamma and thinks it over, on that occasion the mindfulness awakening factor of the monk is aroused. On that occasion the monk develops the mindfulness awakening factor. On that occasion the mindfulness awakening factor of the monk comes to fulfillment by development. Dwelling thus mindfully, he discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom, examines it and makes an investigation of it. Whenever a monk dwelling thus withdrawn discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, on that occasion the investigation of Dhamma awakening factor of the monk is aroused. On that occasion the monk develops the investigation of Dhamma awakening factor. On that occasion the investigation of Dhamma awakening factor of the monk comes to fulfillment by development, etc., etc. So it goes on to the next one. From here it goes on to the next one, which is virya, which is energy, and so forth, until samadhi and upekkha, equanimity. So you see that sati as an awakening factor need not necessarily pertain only to Satipatthana, like some of you maintain, nor does it need to be something experiential. Yeah, it starts from something very basic. Maybe this is a low-end sati, remembering the instructions, like Sister Chua just said just now, that remembering the instructions so that you can examine it, investigate it, and to see how to put it into practice. Right? That is also investigation of the Dhamma. Right? But these are only two aspects, There are actually many other ways that sati can be reckoned as an awakening factor. Now let's look at the Bojjhanga Samyutta. That's in the Samyutta Nikaya. What we read just now also is also from the Bojjhanga Samyutta, but there are more suttas from that Samyutta that talks about many ways in which the 7 awakening factors can be aroused and put to use, not confined to just the Satipatthanas. Yeah, because a lot of people, especially Satipatthana yogis, think that theirs is the only right awakening factor, and others are wrong. So I want you to, open up your minds and be more humble. Okay, let's go on to mindfulness. This one is what we just said just now. I'm just going very quickly over this. Okay, this one is another one. It says, whenever mindfulness there is of things internal, of things external, that is also the awakening factor of mindfulness. This one sounds more like the Satipatthana sort of mindfulness. You're remembering your breath internally, you're remembering, things externally, and looking at them in terms of maybe, and not really in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta. That will be the aspect of dhammavicaya already, right? Looking back at what had just happened. Investigation of Dhamma is whenever a monk, okay, this is what we just read just now, same. And this is an extension of the second sutta. Whenever one discriminates Dhammas internally or externally, with wisdom, examines them, makes an investigation of them, that is the awakening factor of investigation of states. Now, I want to remind you that sati and panya, or investigation, are two different things. Some people tend to mix them together. It's okay as a practitioner for you to mix them up together, but if in terms of very technical terms, they are separate phenomena, in the sense that to give a simile, it's just like an organization. You are working for a corporation. Then you have the executive, you have the board of directors, you have the executive managers, and then you have different departments. You have the HR department, the PR department, the accounts department, the admin department, marketing department, and so forth, right? Each of them has its own function. But all of them has to function harmoniously in order for the cooperation to be successful, right or not? So it's the same thing. The citta is composed of many different mental factors, and each of them has its own job to do. And the job of sati is very specialized. The job of sati is just to bring a past object to the attention of the mind. Alright? The past object could be a Dhamma talk you heard before, some principles, some instructions. The past object could be a past life. The past object could be an immediate past object, what has just happened at any of the 6 sense doors. It brings it to the attention of the mind. And then once it has done its job, finished. Now who takes over? Panya takes over. Investigation. Now it's the job of dhammavicaya to take over, to investigate the object that has come into its presence. Alright? So that's why Sayadaw Tejaniya wrote this book called Awareness is Not Enough. You're not just barely aware. If you're aware without investigation, it doesn't give you panya. Right? And then sati is not just bare awareness. That's very, very unfair and inadequate translation for sati. Because sati brings with it a lot of background knowledge. A lot of background information. Sati is the one that gives the investigation of Dhamma department, some encoding, some programming. Even though they process information, they must have some software to process it. This software is supplied by sati. Sati is the one that has heard the Dhamma talk, right? And sanya preserves it in the memory. All right, sati is the one that willfully, intentionally tries to remember, recall. And then when you do it again and again and again, it gets embedded into sanya. All right? So sanya, this sati, sanya and panya are very, very closely interrelated. That's why I said earlier in Puttapada Sutta, the Buddha said sanya arises first, followed by jnana, knowledge. So the job of sati is to bring the object, past object, whether it's distant past or immediate past, to the mind's attention. Once it's there, panya takes over to investigate. Yeah, investigate in terms of the background information that has been gathered by sati and sanya, and perception. And then you will try to verify what sanya has embedded in the consciousness. Sanya says everything is anicca, dukkha, anatta. Then panya tries to verify, is it true or not? Is it really anicca, dukkha, anatta? Is there cause and condition or not? That is the job of panya, to verify in experiential reality. Right? Sanya is just giving information from the past, recording past information. Right? So that's why if you do not have any Buddhist background knowledge, you're a non-Buddhist, you go and learn meditation, you go to a traditional Buddhist meditation center where they assume that you already know all these things. So for those people who already know all these things, no need to tell them, everything is anicca, dukkha, anatta. All you need to do is just be aware. In fact, some abhidhammikas, they are so analytical, they tend to analyze everything, and that sometimes get into the way of true mindfulness and true panya. Instead of panya, it is sanya that is taking over, right? It is not a panya that is verifying experientially, but it is just sanya putting on past knowledge onto present experience. Okay, so bare awareness is not enough. You need to have the backing of sati, sanya, and sanya, and then you need to put an active element of investigation. You need to question why. But in order to question why, you need to settle your mind first. If your mind is very, very agitated, how can you ask why? The more you ask, the more agitated you become, because you cannot find the answer. So that's why what I taught you just now, the first 3 steps, that's just to calm your mind. That's not yet going to the next step of asking. That is just to calm your mind, to make it composed. And when your mind is composed, then you can begin to ask questions. Now, even before you begin to ask questions, when your mind is composed, then you can catch the intentions of your mind. Normally people don't catch the intentions. They think what they want to think, they say what they want to say, they do what they want to do, and then think about it later. But if you practice this so-called present moment awareness, 5 sense awareness, continuously or continually throughout the daily life, then you have a reference point. Whenever you notice that your mind is not aware of what you're doing in the present moment, you know that it's thinking. Right? The moment you know that it's thinking, then you can check and see what sort of thought it is, what sort of intention is it. Then you can apply the bar test. Is it beneficial, appropriate, relevant, realistic? And if it's not, then put it away, come back to the present moment. And with practice, you don't just put it away. You can look at it in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta. It's not me, it came by itself. I didn't go and think this idle thought. It's not me who commented on the roach on the woman's face. It's just a thought that arose due to past conditioning. Then you can see anatta, and when you see anatta in that way, although you could say it's on a superficial level, but still it accumulates. And as it accumulates, and you extend it to as many aspects of your life as possible, then it permeates through your mindset, and your attitude will change. Right? So it is sanya, and then one day when the sanya is ripe, then the panya will arise, which is the insight. Insight will arise spontaneously, and it's like a big turnabout in your perception of the world. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Now, this is for all awakening factors. A bhikkhu develops the awakening factor of 1 to 7, right? Sati to the last one, to upekkha. accompanied by metta, karuna, mudita, equanimity, mindfulness of breathing, based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. Okay, so this also is the awakening factor. By doing metta, karuna, mudita, equanimity, mindfulness of breathing, also you are developing the awakening factor of sati and so forth, provided your practice is based on seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release, which means that it is geared towards liberation. If you are just doing it without taking a further step to vipassana meditation, then it may not be the awakening factor. It's the same for various forms of asubha. Perception of a skeleton, of a worm-infested corpse, of a livid corpse, of a fissured corpse, of a bloated corpse. When you develop the awakening factor accompanied by these perceptions, based on seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing and release, that is also qualified as an awakening factor. Right? Then if you develop sati, etc., until upekkha, accompanied by the perception of impermanence of suffering, in the impermanence of non-self in what is suffering, based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release, this will also qualify as the awakening factor. Right? Now, let's look at modern scientists, particularly quantum physicists. Now, quantum physicists nowadays, they're all very they all share this consensus that everything is void. Everything is empty. In the old days, we think that the atom is the smallest unit of particle of matter, but now they say that that's not so. Can you imagine that an atom is like a football field, and then the nucleus is like a football, and then the what you call the neutrons and electrons are moving around, are even smaller than little pins, moving around in that vast space of emptiness. Yeah. So actually, they agree with the Buddhist teaching of emptiness. Actually, everything is empty. There's nothing there, and nothing is permanent, because no scientist has ever seen with your naked eye or with your mind's eye an atom, or an electron, or subatomic particle. They are all concepts that they have derived from formulas, calculations. They have not directly seen them. They cannot see them. And although they know all these things theoretically, they are not awakened. They are not awakened because they don't have the experiential knowledge of seeing and experiencing arising and passing away due to causes and conditions. They know theoretically, but they have no experiential understanding. Right? That's why. And some of when I was in Kota Kinabalu, there was one retired professor of physics. And he had been joining the Dhamma classes for some time, but he was actually from the Catholic background. He was lecturing in Singapore for many years, and now he's retired. He settled down in KK. And he had a hard time trying to understand the principles of Buddhism until somebody lent him the Heart Sutra. When he read the Heart Sutra, and then immediately he said, "Oh yeah, now I can, I can jive with it. It makes sense to me. It makes perfect sense to me, because it's all talking about emptiness." And he wrote an article, about how to reconcile, or how to compare, how we compared modern quantum physics, the findings of modern quantum physics to this idea about impermanence and not self and emptiness. And he wrote at the end of his article, it's a wonder how the Buddha knew all this more than 2,500 years ago without the sophisticated instruments that we have. Actually, what we have now is very primitive compared to the mind, isn't it? The best and the most sophisticated computer you have in the world cannot be compared to your brain and the system that is operating in our body. Right? So all these things is not just theoretical knowledge. Although theoretical knowledge is important, you still have to apply that to experiential understanding. Okay? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, this one is also very obvious. If it develops the awakening factor accompanied by the perception of abandonment, of dispassion, of cessation based upon seclusion, dispassion and cessation maturing in release, and then that also qualifies. But here it seems that maybe this is a copy and paste job, because a perception of dispassion is already there, and why should we be based on dispassion? And cessation is already there, why should we be based in cessation? Right? We don't know. This is something which is more applicable to everyone, and I think it's more inspiring, because it says that when bhikkhus, a noble disciple, listens to the Dhamma with eager ears, attending to it as a matter of vital concern, directing his whole mind to it, on that occasion the 5 hindrances are not present in him. On that occasion, the 7 factors of enlightenment go to fulfillment by development. So it's no wonder that people during the Buddha's time got enlightened while they were listening to Dhamma talks, right? Because at that time, your mind has been freed from the 5 hindrances, and the 7 factors of enlightenment are being aroused and developed. Okay, so listen to more Dhamma talks more intently. Besides meditating, of course. Yeah. Okay, that's all for awakening factors. Do you have any questions before we go on to a summary and conclusion for today's session?